friends, and welcome back to Our Peaceful Haven. Today we are going to make some butter fresh from raw milk that we picked up, and I'm also here just making some homemade chicken broth and adding in some veggies, and this is just going to sit all day and cook, so I went ahead and recorded it just to show how I do that. I take water, vinegar, and vegetable scraps that I save in my freezer, and any sort of bones that I may have saved or cooked from a previous meal, and add that to the crock pot, and I let it cook for 2 days on low, and then I will strain it and can it. And for lunch we're going to have some leftover rice and chicken, and I'm adding some canned taco soup from last summer, and we'll just add that in, mix it together, add some spices, and that will be our lunch. This would be a perfect meal to use some of that chicken broth that we're making, but I decided just to put water, rinse out my jars. I always do that. You don't want to waste any bits inside of your jars. So I rinse out my jars, and then I'm going to add some onion powder, garlic powder, taco seasoning, and oregano. All of my spices come from Azure Standard except for the oregano. It's from Aldi. But I really love Azure Standard seasonings, especially their mixes like the taco seasoning or their Italian mix or their pizza seasoning. They are definitely one of our favorites. They taste super fresh, and the quantities of all of the different spices are just right. This sour cream is also from Azure Standard. I've mentioned it before. It's our favorite. And as you can see, my broth is bubbling well, so I'm going to turn it down to low and just let it sit for the rest of the evening and tomorrow. Now we are going to make our butter, which is the whole focus of this video. What I'm doing is starting with some raw milk that has set in our refrigerator for a couple days, and as you can see right along the hump of the gallon jar, you can see that there is a cream line. So I want to take a ladle or a scoop or a spoon, whatever. I've also done a syringe, and you want to just get as much of that cream off of the milk as you can. You want to try to stop before you get to the milk. It just helps the butter stay fresh longer, but I like to leave just a little bit of cream in the milk so that our family can enjoy the richness, and it makes it extra fatty and yummy and good. So I don't scoop all of my raw milk. What I'll typically do is the first 2 gallons, because we get 5 gallons at a time, the first 2 gallons I will leave them because they haven't quite separated by the next day. But let's be real, the first gallon we drink almost all of it that first day. We make chocolate milk and we drink it, and then that second gallon, the second day, I don't skim it off, and then usually about the 3rd, 4th, or 5th gallon I will skim the cream off of there and either use it to make whipped cream or butter, or sometimes I use it to make Alfredo pasta. But as you can see around the edge of my measuring cup, you can see that I'm starting to collect some milk. So after another scoop or 2, I will probably stop collecting from this jar and move on to the next jar. There's something that's just so satisfying about skimming the cream off of your milk and knowing that this has just come straight from the cow. Literally, this one, this batch was picked up the day that the cows were milked, so you know it's super fresh, and you know where it's coming from, you know whose cows they are, and it just makes you feel like an adult. This is our chocolate syrup that we make. I'll share that one day once I make it again. I had some cream already in the refrigerator, so I'm going to pull that out as well, and I had stuck my mixing bowl in the refrigerator to get it nice and cold so that this will mix up a little bit faster. I have found that this cream takes a little bit longer to whip up than, say, a carton of heavy cream from the grocery store. It's just not as fatty as perhaps that cream is, but that's okay for me. I'd rather know where it comes from and know that it's fresh. I know what these cows are fed, all of that kind of stuff. So Sometimes I still use the heavy cream from the store. In fact, I often do. If I'm making whipped cream and I need it done quickly, then I will just use the heavy cream from the store. But this is fun to make a batch of butter and not let the cream, I guess, go to waste. It never goes to waste. We drink it, but it's just a nice added bonus to also having milk to drink. There's lots of ways to make butter. You can make butter in a blender, you can do it with your mixer, and of course you can also use a butter churn. I just like to use my mixer. That's just my preference. I can let it run and it's not as loud as our blender. So you can see here that my cream is already starting to form some, what you would call maybe like a stiff peak or whipped cream. So I'm going to let it keep going, and I put my towel over top of that because it likes to make a huge mess. And every now and then you're just going to scrape down the sides so that you're just making sure that it all turns to butter if possible. So I'm scooping out some to have as whipped cream. I didn't need all of that to be butter. I knew in the morning we would want some whipped cream for either pancakes or waffles, so I went ahead and scooped some out. And you can see it's nice and fluffy. I'll just need to add some powdered sugar and vanilla to that for whipped cream. What's interesting is after a certain point, it'll start thinning back out again. It'll look like something's wrong, but this is just the process of it turning into butter. So it'll go from a thick, full bowl to it'll start getting more watery, which is just separating the fat from the buttermilk. So you can see here it starts getting super messy. It'll start slinging out the buttermilk from the butter fats. So you'll definitely want your towel nearby to be able to cover up your mixer and keep your workspace a little bit more tidy. And we're almost there. We almost have our butter, so it starts sloshing around and making a mess. Just cover it up, let it run for a little bit longer, and you'll know when it's done, when it's not really changing anymore and it's starting to slosh up, and like you can see here, I'm starting to have chunks of butter. Alright, so what I have found for my butter in my warm kitchen today and some other times, it just totally depends. Sometimes I don't need the ice, but if I add some ice into the butter and the buttermilk, it just helps the butter solidify just that much more, and it makes it easier to handle. So you'll see in just a moment when I add the salt and stuff, it just makes it easier. Otherwise you have like a room temperature butter that's spreadable, which is lovely and great, but if you want it to be a little bit more firm to be able to rinse it out well, then add that ice in there and it just helps you out. So you can see I can just handle the butter really easily, and I just pour out the rest of the ice. And then you want to rinse this with really cold water and try to get the rest of the buttermilk out, and it just helps it last longer in your refrigerator or on your countertop, depending on how you plan to store it. So you just squeeze your butter and get out all the liquid, all the excess buttermilk, and just rinse it a few times until you can't squeeze any more liquid from the butter. we decided to weigh our butter just to sort of give an idea how much butter comes from that much cream, and we got about 7 ounces. So here I'm just going to smooth it out a little bit and add some pink Himalayan salt and just work that into the butter. I am going to store this butter in the refrigerator, so I'm just using a glass dish and pressing it down in there so that way I can scoop it as I need it or cut off a chunk. And so here we are, just putting it in the container, and we will actually use this butter for dinner tonight.
That looks like Play-Doh.
And this is the buttermilk that's left over from making butter. And I like to use this for any sort of baking or anything that calls for milk for cooking. You can just use this buttermilk and it has a really tasty flavor. It actually is really good for biscuits as well. It's not quite the same as the buttermilk that you would buy in the store, but nonetheless, it's delicious and it works great and helps your baked goods be extra fluffy. I literally have to wipe everything down after making butter because it never fails. I still make a huge mess. Tonight we're having roast with these mashed potatoes, so I use the buttermilk for my mashed potatoes to get them nice and creamy, and then we'll add some of our homemade butter to make them extra tasty. So that's it. That's how you make butter, and truly it's so simple. Even if you just buy a carton of heavy cream from the grocery store, it's super rewarding. It's just, like I said, it's a very adult, homesteading, fun thing to just know how to do. It's really so simple, and anybody can do it, obviously. So I hope that this has been fun to watch. I'm sure there are so many more technical videos out there about making butter, but it really does not have to be technical. You don't need to measure. It's easy. So enjoy, go make some butter, and have a good evening.
Shalom from our home to yours.